On February 12, 1992, Bara, a quiet farming village in Bihar's Gaya district, was plunged into terror. The villagers, mostly farmers, ended their day unaware of the horror about to unfold. That night, an armed group descended on Bara with a deadly purpose. The attackers moved swiftly, targeting specific homes and dragging men from their families. This was not a random act. It was a calculated massacre, later known as the Bara Massacre. The violence was rooted in deep-seated caste conflict, not just personal vendetta. The attackers, driven by revenge, left behind a scene of devastation. 35 men were killed, their families shattered. The silence that followed was heavier than the violence itself. News of the massacre spread quickly, shocking the entire state. Bara became a symbol of caste hatred and violence in Bihar. The event was not isolated, but part of a larger, ongoing conflict. For survivors, the massacre was not just a headline. It was a wound that would never fully heal. The village's identity was forever changed. Bara's story became a chilling reminder of the dangers of unchecked hatred. The memory of that night still haunts those who lived through it. The tragedy of Bara is a dark chapter in Bihar's history. To understand Bara, we must understand Bihar's deep caste divisions in the 1980s and 90s. Society was sharply divided. Upper castes owned land and power, while Dalits and lower castes worked as landless laborers. Oppression and humiliation bred anger among the poor. The Naxalite movement, led by groups like the Maoist Communist Center, promised justice through armed struggle. In response, upper caste landlords formed private armies, senas, to protect their interests. Violence escalated, with both sides committing brutal attacks. The state often failed to control the bloodshed, sometimes even siding with the powerful. Villages became battlegrounds, and fear ruled daily life. Every act of violence sparked retaliation, fueling a cycle of revenge. Bara's massacre was not a sudden outburst, but the result of decades of inequality and conflict. The land's red earth was stained by the blood of this ongoing war. In this climate, the seeds of the Bara massacre were sown. The tragedy was inevitable in a society so deeply divided. The Bara massacre was meticulously planned by the MCC as an act of vengeance. Bara, home to many Bhumihars, an upper caste group, was chosen deliberately. The attackers, nearly 100 strong, armed themselves and moved in silence. They cut the village's electricity, plunging it into darkness and confusion. Targeted men were dragged from their homes and taken to a nearby canal. There was no mercy, no trial, just execution. Throats were slit with chilling efficiency, sending a message of terror. The operation lasted only hours, but its impact would last generations. 35 men lay dead by dawn. Families were left in shock and mourning. The attackers vanished, leaving behind devastation and fear. News of the massacre spread rapidly, igniting outrage across Bihar. The brutality of the attack marked it as one of the darkest moments in the region's history. For Bara, the night was a turning point. Life would never be the same. The massacre was a calculated act of ideological violence. Its aftermath was only the beginning of a long struggle for justice and healing. The scars of that night remain etched in the village's memory. The MCC, a Naxalite group, orchestrated the massacre, believing violence was necessary for revolution. Their fighters, mostly from oppressed castes, saw the Bhumihars as symbols of their historical oppressors. The 35 victims were targeted solely for their caste, not for personal actions. Many were ordinary farmers, not powerful landlords. The attack blurred lines between guilt and innocence, punishing an entire community. The tragedy lay in this collective punishment, where ideology erased humanity. Bara's victims became casualties in a war driven by anger, history, and blind revenge. The Bara massacre sparked public outrage and demands for justice. Police investigations faced obstacles: fear, silence, and the MCC's secrecy. Despite challenges, several suspects were identified and arrested. The case moved to a special Tada court designed for terrorism cases. After years of delays, 13 were convicted in 2001. 4 received death sentences, others life imprisonment. Appeals followed, with some convictions overturned and death sentences commuted. The legal process dragged on for decades, testing the patience of victims' families. Justice was slow and incomplete, highlighting the difficulties of prosecuting mass violence. The trial exposed the limits of the legal system in the face of fear and political complexity. For many, closure remained elusive. The Bara case became a symbol of both the demand for justice and the frustrations of the system. The struggle for accountability was as painful as the massacre itself. The quest for justice continues to haunt Bara. The massacre left Bara devastated. 35 families lost their breadwinners overnight. Widows and children faced trauma and hardship, their lives forever changed. The village's social fabric was torn apart, deepening caste divisions and mistrust. Fear replaced normalcy, many fled, and those who stayed lived in constant anxiety. Bara became infamous, a case study in caste violence. The massacre did not end the conflict, it intensified the cycle of revenge. Over time, violence lessened, but the memories endured. The canal became a symbol of sorrow, the village a shadow of its former self. Generations grew up haunted by the past. The pain of Bara is a reminder of how hatred can destroy entire communities. Healing has been slow, and the scars remain. Remembering Bara is not about keeping anger alive, but about honoring the victims and learning from the past. It reminds us of the dangers of hatred and division, and the human cost of revenge. Only by facing painful truths can communities begin to heal. Justice, equality, and dignity are the lessons Bara demands we remember. The massacre was a symptom of deep social disease, inequality, and oppression. True healing requires dialogue, not violence. Bara's story urges us to build a more just society where every life is valued. This is the only way to truly honor those lost on that dark night.